Welcome boys and girls, Costin here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. The firestorm continues in Creative Assembly and in the community. Creative Assembly has responded. It's a bit ironic for me because I did my video yesterday about what Creative Assembly should do, and what I stated there is that Creative Assembly should apologize. As I was doing that video, uploading it, rendering, etc., Creative Assembly issued this post talking about the situation with AI and what their plans are. And yes, it does have an apology in it. So, from Borisov, lead technical designer of Total War, they've identified and resolved the leading causes for such failures. The AI recruitment situation, the broken AI nature on recruitment, Lizardmen and other factions. But also that it's very likely there are other cases and we're not yet aware of them. Resolving the immediately known causes of this problem is helping us remove any denser levels of fog that may be obscuring. Okay, and also he commented earlier that we were unprepared for actions that ostensibly could not fail to fail, a cascading effect. Now, my view on this, you can blame CA Sophia for this, but CA Sophia was put in a position of dealing with 10 years of code that, based on many sources, has been described as spaghetti code. And they are clearly struggling to deal with that. It's also a question of how many resources they have, how many people they have, of course. And then CA followed that up, CA Freeman. News on Tides of Torment will take a back seat until we've resolved this issue, and to accept our sincere apologies for experience that you're currently having in the game. Now, how did the community react to all of this? Well, suffice to say, yesterday, we saw the negative reviews on Steam for Total War Warhammer 3 go from 400 negative reviews, as it had been on Sunday, to almost 700. So this obviously continues to provoke a very negative reaction from the community. But the thing about apologies is that I am certain the community managers at Creative Assembly were aware that there was no way they could release a statement in a way that wouldn't be weaponized, if you will, by people who are very, very angry at Creative Assembly. The purpose of an apology is not to stop what's happening. It's to, start the process of dealing with the situation, reflecting that, okay, we screwed up, we're going to do better. Of course, we do actually need to see that before people are willing to accept that from Creative Assembly, and not just on this issue of AI recruitment or AI not working at Total War, but many other issues as well. Of course, this brings into question what Creative Assembly plans to do going forward. It might be a case of Creative Assembly just deciding, okay, we're going to deal with this issue, but we're not going to fundamentally change the way things are handled in the company in terms of resources, developers for Warhammer 3. You can be certain that yesterday spent the entire day in meetings dealing with this crisis. And that is going to continue today. So it's not over. They know it's not over. That's going to continue. That is my perspective on this. To be very clear on this, this is how I view things, not what I've been told by anyone. The reason I expect that to be the case is I've spent a lot of time looking at various situations in companies, in politics, in geopolitics, and it's kind of like that. When you have a crisis, you have all hands on deck type situation to come up with a plan to resolve the crisis. This is the first step. It's not the final one. Hopefully that hot fix and Tides of Torment are not going to be the final steps either. I think, and I'm going to say this very clearly to Creative Assembly if they're watching, and I suspect they are, you need to go further or this will keep happening. Or the community outrage will just keep growing. I hope they're aware of that. If they're not aware of it, I'm saying it right now, you need to do more. But how did we end up in this situation? we can look at various issues of Warhammer 3. We can look at the history of the game, but really I think it's worth looking at the internal dynamics of Creative Assembly based on the public record and various things that have been said publicly over the years. Various things CA has said, various things others have said with sources in Creative Assembly, and let me paint the timeline as best I can. Between 2011 until the end of 2023, one of the key figures in Creative Assembly, one of the key decision makers in the company, was Rob Bartholomew. He wasn't the only one. Far from it. In fact, for a number of years, he had someone else with a great deal of power within the company. We'll get to him later. But a lot of the decisions, a lot of the things that happened in Creative Assembly, what happened in Total War, were done under Rob Bartholomew. The direction of the company, projects, budgets, resources, you name it, that all happened under Rob. So everything from Free Kingdoms to Troy to Warhammer games, etc., Rome 2, like basically everything from Rome 2 until Hyenas was done under Rob Bartholomew. Now, at one point, Rob Bartholomew decided, along others, again, it's not just one person, it's not just about an individual, this was a systemic failure, but Rob, Sega, Creative Assembly as a whole decided to make Hyenas. And they put a lot of money in it. Multiple years of development, a lot of money, a lot of people being hired to just work on Hyenas. Creative Assembly by the end of 2023 had something like 900 people. A lot of those were brought specifically for Hyenas. We had seen for years that Creative Assembly was hiring a lot of people. It was in large part due to the Hyenas situation. So Rob essentially staked everything he had on Hyenas. He believed that CA needed to change its direction as a company and release the next Apex Legends, Fortnite, you name it. That was what he decided, and it failed. It failed very, very hard for Creative Assembly, and it really angered Sega. I'm not certain how Sega realized that Hyenas was not going to work, but they did. They did before it was launched. Maybe it was the situation of Shadows of Change. Maybe it was beta reaction, statistics on that. But regardless of the reasoning there, Sega stepped in. And they had before, ever since 2017, basically, there was a period of time, 2012, 2017, when Sega was more involved in Creative Assembly. But after 2017, it was down to Rob Bartholomew and CA themselves. Sega was not so involved back then. Obviously, they were involved, but not so much. Well, Sega stepped in. They realized it was not going to work, and they decided to pull the plug on Hyenas and then fire a lot of developers. How many? We do not know. But at the time, based on what I've been able to find, what people talked about 2 years ago, this was all 2 years ago, there was real discussion, apparently, that Sega considered whether or not it was worth keeping CA around or just shutting it down completely. Understand the nature of the gigantic failure that Hyenas was. You don't lose $100 million. It also is on Sega, to be clear, because $100 million is not something that happens without their approval, without their involvement. They were involved in that. They agreed with it. It didn't work out. Sega got pissed. Rob Bartholomew got removed. A lot of people got removed. And then came the aftermath. In that aftermath, we had a period of time where we didn't know what CA was going to do. Like, there were probably a lot of discussions within Sega and CA at the time of what to do. And then in December of 2023, Creative Assembly released their statement, their apology at the time, about how they're going to change things around, do things better, etc. And since then, they have moved in a different direction. We ended up getting Thrones of Decay, we ended up getting Pharaoh Dynasties, and I remember being contacted by a former CA developer with whom I had spoken to with regards to the Hyena situation. I got contacted and said, you guys won. You guys, as in the community, you achieved success. That was what I was told by a former CA developer at the time. Now, I certainly didn't feel that in December 2023, but there was a possibility, and I hoped it would bear fruit, that things would get better. And they did. Thrones of Decay, Pharaoh Dynasties. In January of 2024, Rob Bartholomew was replaced by Jurgen Post in charge of Creative Assembly. Now, Post was brought in there by Sega. Sega no longer trusted Creative Assembly on their own, and they own Creative Assembly, so they decided they needed their guy to oversee everything. And for a while, it worked. Post's job might as well have just been described in 2 words. Fix it. Sega had decided that CA was worth keeping around, and they wanted to improve things. And it worked. When you look at Thrones of Decay, when you look at Dynasties, the amount of things that Creative Assembly did with Decay as a DLC and Dynasties as an expansion is monumental in terms of changes that have been implemented in Total War history. But while Thrones of Decay ended up working brilliantly, and so the Dynasties, and I could feel it, like, as a content creator, when I got early access to Thrones of Decay, like, I started playing as, like, it just felt amazing for the dwarves, for the Empire, just vast improvements. Nurgle less so, but still substantially better than what had been before. You could really feel that Creative Assembly was working full throttle on that content. But what came after? Because Post had done his job, essentially. He had proven that Creative Assembly had value. He had improved the process to deliver one of the best DLCs in Total War history and a significant expansion for Dynasties. But then there was discussion of what to do next, and not just in CA, but in Sega as well. After Dynasties came out, there was a survey that came out from Sega asking the community what they wanted. So that was obviously done to determine how the public felt about it. And shortly after that, Sega and CA decided to do the following. They were going to focus the core Creative Assembly team on future projects, and they were going to assign CA Sophia from Pharaoh to work on Warhammer 3. That was the decision made in 2024. While I do enjoy Pharaoh Dynasties, and I think it's a really good game at the moment in a lot of ways, it certainly could use a lot more content and a lot more major updates, but it had potential. But that potential was always limited from my perspective. So it's a shame, don't get me wrong, but the logic of the decision holds up. It's not a bad decision. Focus on people who have take people who have clearly proven they can do it, assign them to Warhammer 3 to try and resolve the situation with Warhammer 3, and put everyone else on future projects. Now, here's where the big problem comes in. It didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is because of spaghetti code, because of technical debt in Warhammer 3, in the code, that isn't just based on Warhammer 3, it's Warhammer 2, Warhammer 1, into Warhammer 3. So almost 10 years at that point when CA Sophia was even given the job to work on Warhammer 3. And we've seen blog post after blog post, discussion from developers again and again on how hard it is for them to deal with what they've inherited. One can blame CA Sophia, one can blame CA management on this, but I wouldn't organize a witch hunt against people that are trying to rebuild a house after other people burnt it down. The people who burnt it down, they were held accountable. Rob Bartholomew is no longer in CA, as far as I know. This is the key point. They might have known or not that they were going to struggle with this. I don't think they were completely blind on it, but I don't know. That's just my perspective. There's different perspectives on it. They either didn't know, didn't care, or they knew but didn't think it was going to be so bad. Different perspectives on that. Clearly, it ended up being worse than they expected. So even though they gave the CA Sophia guys resources to do it, and they've been trying to, but they're struggling dealing with those problems inherent in the Warhammer Free code. Maybe the Nouveau is not helping with that, regardless, or other things aren't helping with that, but regardless, that was the decision. It wasn't a bad decision. The reason we ended up in the current situation is because there were perhaps not enough resources for the actual problems. They underestimated the problem or didn't realize it was going to be a problem, and now they have to fix that. So what I would say here, what does CA need to do? They need to improve that process. And by that I mean, whatever ended up happening behind closed doors, clearly it failed. Either management was aware and didn't act on it, or they weren't aware, in which case the internal process they have in developing the game didn't work. And that is exactly what I would say to Creative Assembly at this point in time directly. If I was in a boardroom with upper management, that's what I would say to their faces. You need to improve your internal process so something like this doesn't happen again. Of course, there is the discussion of how much they care about Warhammer Free, how many resources they want to allocate to Warhammer Free. But regardless of resources or not, the bigger problem is the company process failed. And if they don't fix that, it's not going to just have severe consequences, because we are seeing severe consequences for Creative Assembly right now because of the failure of that process. But if they don't fix this, they're going to get another systemic failure. And if they get another failure like this, that's it. If the next Total War game or next projects don't work out because the internal process doesn't work, that might be it for Creative Assembly. So in conclusion, they can either fix this situation or they will be shut down. As clear-cut as I can put it. That's my perspective. Costin signing out.